Bloxburg has had over 100 updates since the release of the game back in 2016, and they are all very different. So I made this fancy tier list, and I will be ranking every Bloxburg update to see which ones are amazing and which ones are not. Before we start, I'm trying to reach 200,000 by the end of 2024, so if you could subscribe and help me reach my goal, I'd really appreciate it. With that being said, let's start with the most recent update and make our way back to the oldest. 0.13.1 added, in my opinion, one of the best seasonal features. A third currency named tickets was added for Halloween. You could collect tickets by trick-or-treating and doing the ghost hunt game mode at Plenty O' Pumpkins. Ambient sounds were added to the world as well for more immersion, which is a very underrated change. I would put this update in best, but since there were initially so many bugs with the ghost hunting game mode that pretty much made it unplayable, I'm gonna put it in great. 0.13.0 was overall a very good update. 4 big changes were made that people had been demanding. Fainting, hospital bills and towing bills were removed, and job earnings were increased to match what they had previously paid before the equal pay update. All of those changes alone easily puts this update in great, but we haven't even talked about the new features. Public neighborhoods were introduced, which made finding people to play with a million times easier. Voice chat was added, and a skip tutorial button was added to the extremely long tutorial that was making new players quit. I know we're only 2 updates in, but it feels wrong to put this update any lower than best. 0.12.9 was a decent update. The biggest new feature was the ability to catch bugs. It's definitely a fun feature, but catching bugs doesn't really have anything to do with the main goal of the game: make money and build on your plot. Sure, it's fun to collect items, but since you can't sell bugs, they don't really have any value. Another change was revamping the campsite, which I'm actually pretty happy with. Although there's nothing special you can do there, it looks much better than the old campsite. And it also added some good new trees, so I think it's fair to put this update in alright. 0.12.8 was the 2024 summer update, which means the summer festival and firework booth were added back. It states in the changelog that every banned player was now unbanned, and while that's true, it's only true for like half of the banned players. Bramp stated in the official Bloxburg Q&A that they had problems with unbanning players, and they're still working on unbanning everyone. Since we didn't know that at the time of this update, a lot of people were really upset. The World Food Festival was added in this update, which introduced tons of new foods from around the world. While it's great that they added so many new foods, you gotta remember that this was around the time where everyone was upset with the hospital and towing bills, and adding new foods had nothing to do with that. One change that was relevant though was adding the ability to hide the huge blue parking areas. I'm putting this update in neutral because there's good parts to it, but also a lot of stuff that wasn't addressed. 0.12.7 was an update we waited a month for and got barely anything. Bloxburg had just announced that they were going free to play, and instead of adding a big new feature for all the new players that were about to join, we only got 3 things: a moving truck, a couch car, and an early access trophy for people that bought the game. I get that there was probably a lot of behind the scenes work going on to make sure the game was ready to go free to play, but there still could have been at least something cool, so I think it's fair to put this update at the bottom. 0.12.6 was amazing because we got towing bills, hospital bills, and equal pay that lowered everyone's earnings. So obviously I'm putting this update in best, only if the best rank is pink at the bottom of the list and named who thought this was a good idea. The pre-built house catalog was also introduced in this update, but it's not exactly what people were expecting. Everyone wanted it to be an open feature that allowed anyone to upload their own houses, but only content creators could upload their houses, which is definitely upsetting, but Froggy stated in the Q&A that it's not really possible for them to make one, so I'm not going to let this new feature affect the rank I chose. 0.12.5 is known as the homeless update. That's because a ton of broken themed items were added to build mode, as well as 5 new materials. That's it. While this update kinda sucks, I actually see a lot of people using the new items in their builds, so instead of ranking it at the bottom, I'm going to give it pretty bad. 0.12.4 was Bloxburg's 2024 Valentine's update. That means there were some new Valentine's themed items and food. They also added some new animations, a new update log on the main menu that initially covered up the neighborhood info, and they removed the snow. Also not an amazing update, but I wouldn't consider it bad, so I'm gonna put it in meh. And that was every update so far from 2024. Now we are going over every update from 2023. 0.12.3 brought fireworks back for New Year's, and it also revamped the party invitation feature. Some new name tags were added which helped people stand out in the chat, and the map terrain went from the old triangle terrain to a new smooth voxel pixel surface, which looks kind of funny when you're far away. This was a solid update with some decent features, so I'm gonna put it in alright. 0.12.2 was Bloxburg's 2023 Christmas update. All of the winter locations were brought back and a new ice skating rink was introduced. 2 new vehicles were added, the pickup truck and Astro X200. Tons of seasonal items and foods were added, as well as 4 new basic shapes. And a new currency pack subscription was introduced, which you gotta pay real money for, so this was a pretty good update, and I had a lot of fun doing the elf hunt, so I'm gonna put it in great. 0.12.1 added a very useful feature. Customizable permission settings were introduced, which meant you could now change pretty much every permission for each role. These 3 kids vehicles were added, and a bunch of kids themed furniture was added too. This update also brought the family tree feature, which I feel like it's kinda useless. So apart from the customizable permission settings, everything else was decent. I'm gonna put this one in alright. 0.12.0 was the 2023 Halloween update. The Plenty O Pumpkins and Orchard Farm was re-added, and Sabrina's Quest was introduced for the first time. Every day you could complete a task from Sabrina, and once you finished all of them, you would receive a trophy. The backpack feature was also added in this update, which allowed you to equip pretty much every interactive item no matter where you were. And the last big change was every TV channel getting overhauled. I definitely missed the old blah blah, but you gotta admit, the new channels look pretty good. A bunch of food and build mode items were added as well, so I'm gonna put this Halloween update in great. 0.11.9 introduced the first really good job to Bloxburg, which is the fast food worker. Even though it's only one job, there's technically 6 or 7 different jobs that you can do inside of it, and compared to the other jobs, it's actually fun. With this new job came Blox Burgers, which is just a bigger and revamped version of Bloxy Burgers. The overall job level was added, which means if you are level 100 overall, you are level 100 at every job. That means people can work at any job they want without having to worry about not getting paid as much. I remember when this update first came out, and I was very happy with it, so I think it's fair to put this update in best. 0.11.8 was also a very good update with a lot of new features, so let's quickly go over them. The observatory and beach got a much needed revamp. These 3 new vehicles were introduced to the game. The ability to build pools on every floor was added, and the celebration of Summer Festival was put in the city field for the first time. A few days after the update, Bloxburg had a very cool event where a firework tipped over and blew up Bloxy Burgers. But the best part was that no one was expecting it, which made it even more surprising. I really enjoyed this update too, and started to feel better about Coffee Stain's ownership of Bloxburg. So I'm also gonna put this in best, because why not? 0.11.7 was Bloxburg's athletic update. For the first time, a Bloxburg skill was revamped. The athletic skill went from having a max of 10 levels to a max of 30. Tons of rewards were also added to each level, which made the time spent exercising worth it. The ability to sprint was added, which meant running across the map was just a little bit less time consuming. The Bloxburg gym was renovated into this new modern gym, and finally, exercise animations were added so you can increase your athletic skill anywhere. This was definitely a good update, but since the athletic skill isn't really a super important part of the game, I'm gonna put it in great. 0.11.6 added the RGB color wheel to build mode. This color wheel allows you to use over 16 million different colors in your builds. The only part that kinda sucks is the color wheel costs 600 block bucks. You can definitely get it without spending Robux though through events and daily bonuses, but it would have been nice if the color wheel was available to everyone. Solar panels were also added, which are really expensive but help with reducing bills, and the final big change was birds, butterflies, and bees that fly around certain objects. I'm gonna put this update in great. 0.11.5 added these items as well as a few other build mode items, and that's pretty much it. I'm giving this update a meh. 0.11.4 was Bloxburg's 2023 Valentine's update, which meant the So Sweet stand was put back in front of the supermarket. And just like the previous update, a bunch of build mode items were added to the game. It's a pretty small update, so I'm putting this one in meh. And that was every update from 2023, so now let's go over 2022's updates. 0.11.3 was Bloxburg's 2022 New Year's update. Other than bringing fireworks back, some appetizers were added as well as a food warming tray. That's pretty much it, which means this is the 3rd update in a row getting put in meh. But that's about to change. 0.11.2 was the 2022 Christmas update, and it added a new game pass called Transform Plus. This game pass was a game changer because it allows you to move and rotate basic shapes and most items in build mode. This made it much easier to build complicated objects and structures, which definitely changed the way people build today. The Board Summit XL was added, it's very big and very expensive, and Bloxburg participated in the 3rd season of RB Battles. There was now a maze on the event plot, and if you completed it, you would get the 2022 RB Battles trophy. Since this update improved one of the most important build mode tools, I gotta put it in best. 0.11.1 introduced the Transform tool. The previous update we talked about was over Transform Plus, which is a game pass. The Transform tool wasn't really useful in this update because at the time it only really worked on pillows. This update also added the ability to open and close shower doors, for those of you that wanted to know that. There were also some new build mode items, and that's pretty much everything. I'm putting this update in alright, because it's not really game changing. 0.11.0 was the 2022 Halloween update, which meant the Plenty-O Pumpkins and Orchard plot was brought back. But since this was before Sabrina's quest got added, the haunted house was just a corn maze. Popcorn and candy machines were introduced, you can now push carried players in wheelbarrows, and the neighborhood player limit was raised from 50 to 75. Not a big update, but increasing the neighborhood player limit was definitely very helpful for live streams, so I'm putting it in great. 0.10.9 revamped toilets, pretty cool. Appliances also now get dirty when you use them, and these cool structurals were added to the game. Also not a big update, so I'm putting it in meh. 0.10.8 was the 4th of July update, which meant fireworks were back and some new foods were added. The ability to hand people trays of food was also added, which is definitely useful sometimes, so I'm gonna put this in neutral. 0.10.7 added the RB Breeze hardtop and convertible. Above ground pools were introduced for the first time, and they have a nice fake water texture. In game, time now passes slower, but at night it speeds up if most players in the server are sleeping. The only other big changes were updating every job's uniforms and a bunch of bug fixes. Overall, it's a pretty decent update, so I'm gonna put it in alright. Pretty much every update from 0.10.6 was related to avatars. The toddler age was added, along with the Little Wheels convertible and off-roader. Marvelous Mood was introduced, which keeps your moods up for longer. Layered clothing support was added for your Roblox avatar, and the outfit accessory limit was increased. The only build mode related change was that you can now resize most structurals with the scale tool. This update was also good, and I definitely say it's better than the previous one, so I'm gonna put it in great. 0.10.5 was the 2022 April Fool's update, and they added a school, kind of. The city hall had a small revamp, and there was now a room you could go in to take a test and receive the school trophy. The rest of the update was adding tons of clutter items and improving the game overall. I think this April Fool's update was pretty funny, so I'm putting it in great. 0.10.4 was the 2022 Valentine's update, and once again the So Sweet stand was brought back. Here's the rest of what was added. Neighborhood owners can now use free cam, which is insanely helpful. You can now hide players' name tags, and a bunch of furniture, windows, and doors were added. Definitely a useful update, and I use free cam in pretty much every single video, so I don't care. I'm giving this update a best. And that is every update from 2022, but this is getting a little bit repetitive, so let's speed through 2021. 0.10.3 brought fireworks back for New Year's and introduced the firework display at the City Hall. Not amazing, but not terrible, so I'm putting it in neutral. 0.12.2 was Bloxburg's Christmas update, which meant the map got covered in snow and the seasonal buildings came back. 2 new vehicles were added, the Snow Tech Long Track and the Snow Scooter, and a bunch of build mode items were introduced. I'm gonna give this one an alright. 0.10.1 was a decent update. The pool water got reverted to its original realistic water, which I'll go more into detail about that in a few updates. Transparent beam and rod structurals were introduced, and finally, food takes multiple bites to eat. I'm also giving it an alright. 0.10.0 was the 2021 Halloween update. A new seasonal location named Plenty-O Pumpkins and Orchards Farm was added. These Halloween foods were added, thunderstorms were introduced, as well as the lightning trophy, and finally, in neighborhoods you can now have the ability to change the time, weather, and ground color. That last feature is very useful, and Plenty-O Pumpkins looks really good, so I'm putting this update in best. 0.9.9 added water slides, which are actually pretty fun. The other part of the update though was a new pool water texture that people really hated. The water went from this realistic texture to this plastic, and the 5 billion trophy was given to everyone because the game hit 5 billion visits. This update added a lot of good features, but the water texture was just terrible. So since this is half good and half bad, I'm putting it in neutral. 0.9.8 was the 2021 4th of July update. Fireworks were brought back and foods such as steak and corn on the cob were added. added, and most windows and door frames can now be resized. Decent update, so I'm putting it in alright. 0.9.7 was a summer-themed update. Multiple bikes were added, as well as a kick scooter. Water balloons, sidewalk chalk, and a slip and slide were added. Bubble blowing, roller skating, and kite flying was added. And the last big change was more basic shapes and more scalable objects. Another decent update, so I'm putting it in alright. 0.9.6 was a really important update. The scale tool was introduced along with basic shapes, which meant Bloxburg building was about to get a lot more advanced. I'm putting this update in best because it changed Bloxburg building forever. 0.9.5 was all about curtains and blinds for some reason. A few curtains and blinds were added, as well as the ability to open and close them. The only other big change was bringing the So Sweet stand back and Valentine's items back for Valentine's Day. Not a huge update, but the curtains are nice, so I'm gonna put this one in neutral. That is every update from 2021, and I think I did it pretty quick. 2020 was very important though, so let's go a little more into detail this time. 0.9.4 was a New Year's update, which meant fireworks were back, but there was one other change that completely changed Bloxburg building. Beams, rods, planks, moldings, and chains were added. People could use these structurals to create their own objects that are not in the game. Very important update, so I'm putting this in best. 0.9.3 was the 2020 Christmas update, which meant the map was covered in snow and the sledding hut as well as the ice skating rink were brought back. Tom's tree lot and the Santa photo op were introduced, and the snowmobile was added. Even though not a ton of stuff was added, this was a very enjoyable update. Since it was during the pandemic, everyone was very excited to play, and so was I, so I'm putting this update in great. 0.9.2 added the report house button to mailboxes for inappropriate builds, and Bloxburg participated in RB Battles Season 2, which meant the RB Battles maze was added to the event plot. Other than that, nothing really big happened, so this update is going in alright. 0.9.1 was the 2020 Halloween update. 2 new seasonal locations were added for the first time, Plenty O Pumpkins and the Graveyard. There were also some new seasonal foods and items. Not a huge update, but if we remember that these updates were made only by Coeptus and Froggy, it's pretty good, so I'm putting it in great. 0.9.0 added the baby age to Bloxburg as well as the Roto minivan. The family system was added too, but people don't really use it unless they want to carry someone. Other than that, tons of baby related items were added and the ability to hand items to people was introduced. I'd say this update is alright. 0.8.9 added 2 good things. Go-karts were introduced, and the large plot game pass was changed by doubling your plot data, which is extremely helpful because if you look at builds today, half of them are using max plot data. So imagine if they only had half of that. I like this update, and I bet a lot of builders appreciate it too, so I'm putting it in best. 0.8.8 was a 4th of July update. Boomer's Fireworks was added along with some new bigger fireworks. That's pretty much the entire update. It's not amazing, so I'm putting it in meh. 0.8.7 added variable placement for walls. If you press T, you can place doors and windows anywhere on the wall, which made it a lot easier to make builds with elevated floors. The ability to leave food in the oven while baking was added, and while it's not a huge feature, it's definitely one we needed. And finally, a search bar was added to the build mode menu. Compared to the previous update, this one is amazing, so I'm putting it in great. 0.8.6 brought some kitchen related items. Dishwashers and dishes were added, cabinets and counters can now be opened and closed, and kids can now cook. I don't know how safe that is. One of the more important features is that mobile players were given the ability to use the clone tool. This update was definitely packed with a bunch of good features, so I'm putting it in great. 0.8.5 was a pretty important update for roofs. You can now adjust your roof's properties, such as height, pitch, and overhang. This made it much easier to make accurate and unique roofs. Escalators were introduced, as well as 5 new elevator types and the ability to adjust elevator height. And the last major change made it where most wall objects could now be placed on pillars, columns, fireplaces, and stairs. Overall, a very good update, and I'd say that roofs can make or break a build, so this update is going in best. 0.8.4 added security cameras, and that's pretty much it. This update is going in pretty bad. And that is every update from 2020, which means we now need to rank 2019. In 0.8.3, fireworks were added back and Christmas decorations were removed. Other than that, nothing really happened, so this update is going in pretty bad. 0.8.2 though was a lot better. This update brought snow back to Bloxburg, and the sledding hut was introduced for the first time. One of the best Bloxburg features was added too, neighborhoods. For the first time ever, you could now have up to 50 people in one server. server, or you can just have a private server to yourself. This is easily one of the best updates, so I'm putting it in best. 0.8.1 was mainly changes to the avatar editor. You can now buy stuff from the Roblox catalog through the avatar editor, and if you do this, Bloxburg will get a portion of the Robux from each sale. So it's a good way to support them at no extra cost. But if we step back and look at this update as a whole, it kinda sucks. Nothing really new was added, and not everyone uses the avatar editor, so I'm putting this in pretty bad. 0.8.0 was the 2019 Halloween update, and it introduced pumpkin carving. You could also now have up to 5 floors instead of 3, which was huge for people that wanted to make tall builds or realistic builds. Wall moldings and trims were added, and mobile players were given the ability to use manual floor and roof placement. This was a great build mode update with a bunch of new features, so I'm putting this one in best. 0.7.9 added golf carts, swings, trampolines, and playground items were added too, and the donation limit was introduced. Yay. Just because of that, this update is going in pretty bad. In 0.7.8, the bulldoze tool was added, which saved people a lot of time when deleting builds. The only other change was adding a confirmation prompt when boosting your mood, but the bulldoze tool is definitely useful, so I'm putting this update in great. 0.7.7 introduced the clone tool, which is another very important tool for saving time. Also, Bloxburg reached 1 billion visits before this update released, so to celebrate, everyone received the 1 billion trophy as well as 100 Blockbucks. Once again, another useful tool, so this update is going in great. 0.7.6 introduced gardening to Bloxburg, which I think is one of the best features in the game. My opinion is a little bit biased though, because I created the Orange Farm and Berry Bush Farm. Those farms pretty much kickstarted my channel, and I doubt I'd be here today without them. Other than the gardening feature, there wasn't many big changes in this update, so I'm going to put it in great, even though I really want to put it in best. 0.7.5 added an insane amount of food. So much food that I'm just gonna put them all on the screen now because I'm too lazy to read them. No big feature was added, so I'm just gonna put this in alright. 0.7.4 was a pretty big update because basements were introduced, which meant we now had a 4th floor to build on because the multiple floors game pass only went to 3 floors at the time of this update. There were also 3 new pool depths in the game. I think great is a good place to put this. 0.7.3 was a big update. Not really. The snow melted and the New Year's fireworks were removed. This is going in pretty bad. That's every update from 2019, which means we are now in 2018. 0.7.2 only had one interesting addition, which was 2 new cars, the short and long limousine. The rest of the update was just removing Christmas decorations. I definitely like using the limos, but there isn't anything else, so this update is going in meh. 0.7.1 was actually pretty nice. The map got covered in snow and a new ice skating rink was added in the field. The mining job was also introduced, but back then it was the lowest paying job. And the final interesting change was the ability to move your mailbox and replace it with a new one. This update is going in great. 0.7.0 added the friend boost, which meant your moods would now decrease slower when you are near your Roblox friends. The Blockbucks category was added to build mode, which made sorting them a bit easier. And to top it all off, bunk beds were added too. I'm putting this update in alright, because it's definitely features that are nice to have, but it's not very big. 0.6.9 brought Halloween and fall items back to the game. And this is the update that added trays, so you can now hold more than one item at a time. The erase game data button was removed from the menu too, but other than the tray feature, nothing cool was added, so this update is going in meh. 0.6.8 added house-related updates, such as laundry machines, the ability to make your bed, and the ability to throw away trash. Another nice change is that trophies can now be rebought, and that's it. The laundry machines are nice, but not enough to put the update in a higher rank, so I'm giving it a meh. 0.6.7 added fountains, languages, and a redesigned build mode menu. That's it. Even though the redesigned build mode menu looks much better, the rest of the update was pretty bad, so I'm putting this update in pretty bad. 0.6.6 brought 4th of July items back, tents and camping equipment were introduced, and vehicle collisions were removed, so no more hitting people. This update is going in neutral because it's definitely a good update for its time, but it's not incredible. 0.6.5 is one of the best Bloxburg updates ever released. The update expanded the Bloxburg map. It used to look like this, but now it looks like this. The campsite, observatory, and gas station were added along with the expansion. 2 new vehicles were added, the Bloxus TS and Bloxivore 4x4, and parked cars no longer despawn after 5 minutes. I'll explain what that means in a minute. This easily makes it into the best rank. 0.6.4 added telephones to Bloxburg. You can use them to order food and invite players to your house. And one of the most annoying features from this update was cars despawning. Like I mentioned previously, parked cars would despawn after 5 minutes no matter where they were, and that feature was added in this update. Car despawning got really annoying because it would leave you stranded pretty often. Telephones are a nice feature, but the car despawning was definitely not, so this update is going in meh. 0.6.3 added ceiling fans and a couple other build mode items. This update isn't really interesting, but the new items are pretty useful, so I'm going to give it another meh. 0.6.2 was a kitchen update. The take a quick meal button was added to the fridge, and kitchen appliances such as blenders and the double stove were introduced. Also, a lot of appliances got new cooking animations, but they weren't really the best yet. This update made cooking a lot more interactive, so I'd say great is a good place to put it. 0.6.1 added a prompt whenever you try to sell an expensive item, and you can also disable roommate building. That means they can still open doors that are locked for guests, and they can drive your vehicles, but they can't get into build mode. Other than that, not much was added. Doors that are locked for guests are still used to this day in cafes, homes, and pretty much every build, so I think it's fair to put this update in alright. And that is every update from 2018. It wasn't an amazing year of updates, but luckily 2017 was the complete opposite. Starting off strong, 0.6.0 was one of the better Bloxburg updates. Here's what was added. You can now let other people build on your plot. Undo and redo buttons were added to build mode along with weather settings. Quick paint was added for computer users. The power box was added, which made it easy to turn every light on or off, and vehicles now have suspension. Great seems like a good place to put this update. 0.5.9 added fireplaces and 2 new pre-built houses, Peaceful Living and Small Suburban. These houses are definitely some of the better pre-built homes, but they are no longer in the game. And the final big change was adding radios to vehicles. Pretty decent update, so I'm putting it in alright. 0.5.8 added multiple roof types, such as the hip, gable, gambrel, curved, and slanted roofs. It also added awards for reaching level 50 at jobs. Another pretty good small update because we still use these roofs to this day, so I'm also putting this update in alright. 0.5.7 was the first Bloxburg Halloween update. All of the items on the screen were introduced, and not much else was added, but this was also the first Halloween, so it feels wrong putting it any lower than great. 0.5.6 added the ability to have multiple jobs. Before then, you would have to choose one job and stick with it to keep your levels. Speaking of jobs, the woodcutter and janitor jobs were introduced. The cozy cottage pre-built house was also new, and premium features were added, such as having a premium tag in the chat and having reduced bills. This is easily getting ranked best, because imagine being forced to do only one job. Although 0.5.5 was pretty small, it added a very important game pass, and that is the large plot game pass. Plots went from 30 by 30 to 50 by 50, which was very helpful for big builders. I'm not talking about weight, I'm talking about house size. The only other new item from this update was elevators. Maybe I was talking about weight. Although this update wasn't as big as it sounds, it still added much needed features, so I'm putting it in best. 0.5.4 had a whopping 1 change. The old starter house was revamped into this new starter house that we currently have today. I do miss the old starter house, but the new starter house looks much better, so I'm gonna put this update in neutral. 0.5.3 was Bloxburg's first 4th of July. Fireworks were added and some other small features were introduced, such as muffled rain when you're indoors and new animations for Tom. This is the first time Bloxburg had a 4th of July update, so it's gotta go in great. 0.5.2 was a vehicle-related update. Vehicle handling was improved and the quad bike was added along with jumps around the map. This update also added the parking garage. 7 years later and it's still sitting here doing nothing. And worst of all, this update introduced house bills. I get why we have house bills, but do we really need them? Feels like they're just a waste of money. This update is going in meh because I like the quad bike, but not the house bills. 0.5.1 added one thing, and that was package support. I'm assuming that means Roblox packages. It's definitely something that we needed, but since it's the only thing in the update log, I'm putting it in meh. In 0.5.0, the ability to change to a kid, teen, or adult was added, and character customization was introduced, which could be found by interacting with wardrobes or dressers. This update is going in great, because who doesn't like the ability to customize your avatar? 0.4.9 is an update that we should remember, because it added the Advanced Placing Game Pass. Advanced Placing is still used by pretty much every everyone to this day, and it's a very useful feature. So this is easily making it into best. 0.4.8 added air conditioning. There was also a lot of new build mode items and performance improvements, which were definitely needed, and the mood boost was introduced. The things added in this update were not really game changing, but I'm gonna put it in alright because it added a lot of items, and back then we didn't really have many. 0.4.7 also gave us some much needed build mode items. Ramps, curtains, shutters, barrels, bottles, and the neon party pillar were added. I'm putting this one in neutral because it added less items than 0.4.8, and that one is in alright. 0.4.6 also gave a couple build mode items such as pillars, window frames, and fences. Since once again it's less items than the previous update, I'm gonna put this one in meh. 0.4.5 is finally a bigger update. Rain was added to Bloxburg, and a new $75,000 pre-built house named Classic Family Home was added. For all of the older players watching this video, 0.4.5 introduced the cinematic camera shots that would play on the main menu. That is a feature I miss, but it was removed for performance improvements, so I understand why they did it. Back to the update though, I'm gonna put it in great. Bloxburg wasn't very popular back in the day, so from here on out there will be a few missing updates. I spent hours looking, but there's just no documentation of them. 0.4.3 was a pretty solid update considering how old it was. Doorbells and the ability to knock on doors was added, and the equipment frame for holding items went from this to this new improved style. The last big change was that you can now remove vehicles from your plot. I think alright is a good place to put this update. And that is every update from 2017. Now we are in the very first year of Bloxburg's release, 2016. 0.4.2 added fireworks to the game for New Year's. It also added showers and several new decorations. Once again, not a very big update, but we have to remember that back in the day, fixing major bugs was a lot more important than adding new items. I'm gonna rank this neutral. 0.4.1 was the first Bloxburg Christmas update. The map was covered in snow, and special Christmas items, such as the wreath and small Christmas present, were added. Mobile support was introduced, which meant Bloxburg could now be played on more than computer, and the ability to block players from your plot was introduced. This update easily makes it into best because without it, like 70% of Bloxburg's players wouldn't be able to play. 0.3.9 is probably the smallest Bloxburg update to ever release. The only change is that you can now lock your doors. Although it's small, the ability to lock your doors is very important, so this is the only small update going in great. 0.3.5 added 2 new jobs for the BFF supermarket, the stalker and cashier. Donations were also added, and back then they had no limit. Donations are used all the time, so this update easily makes it into best. 0.3.4 was the first time Bloxburg added cars. It wasn't mentioned which vehicles these were, but since there were only 2 cars at the time, my guess is that they were probably the RiOT 500 and Blox A Voyage. Imagine how long it would take to travel across the map without a car. This is also going in the best rank. And the oldest documented update is 0.2.5, which released Bloxburg into beta testing for 25 Robux. For the 3rd time in a row, this update is going in best, because this video wouldn't be a thing if it wasn't for the release of Bloxburg. And here is how I ranked every Bloxburg update. If there's any changes you think I should have made to my list, let me know down in the comments. Also, make sure to leave a like. It's free and helps me out a ton. My socials are on the screen now if you want to follow me there. But that's it from me. Thank you for watching, and make sure to stick around for the next video.